We complain about countless amount of things in our daily lives, and we never express it to take a stand against something bigger. Like these people, everyone is occupied with their own business and their own individual lives. But how were our ancestors? They confronted something that was far more powerful, violent, and vigorous to gain back something what they deserved. And now, this is the history of the military officials during Goryeo, the second latest Korean dynasty, and how they successfully rebelled against the corrupted government to gain back their rights stolen by the king and the civil officers. This revolt of the military officials during Goryeo is called Mushin JeongByun, where Mushin means the military officials and JeongByun means revolt. This historical revolt was fiercely led by JeongByun, who was an attentive and persistent soldier of Goryeo. He was gradually promoted as the chief of general staff by earning the king's trust with his loyalty towards the king. But what caused him and the military officials to begin one of the most violent revolts recorded in the ancient Korean history? The hierarchy of Goryeo was in a form as it is shown in the diagram. The king was on the top, followed by the government officials and citizens. On the surface, the system looked very stable, but internally, there was a problem lying between military and civil officials. In Goryeo, the government system was unfair towards military officials in a way that it limited their power and opportunity to promote and earn reputation for their work. The reason for this problem dates back to early 10th century, when Wanggeon, the first king of Goryeo, established Goryeo. King Wanggeon purposely weakened the military power of the country in order to weaken the local lords. Furthermore, later kings of Goryeo increased the number of civil officials in the government to work for the king. As a result, the military power was significantly weakened while the civil officers gained massive amount of power and reputation. The government and the king eventually started to collapse. The civil officers, taking advantage of the power, brutally abused the military officials. This diagram shows the types of entrance exams people took to enter the government. First, there was the civil service examination, technician examination, and Buddhist examination. Other than these tests, there were no other examinations for the military officials, but instead, they just had to be physically well built or recognized by the king with the skills they show on the martial arts game. First, the military officials were not given the authority to rule or lead the troops even though they were the generals, but instead, the civil officers were given total authority over the troops. This meant that the civil officers were credited for victorious wars instead of the military officials and the soldiers who were brave and loyal enough to risk their lives to fight in wars for the country. Due to these internal problems within the system, the military officials were not able to promote. Second, the king, Goryeo, himself was corrupted and was the main factor of leading the country to downfall. All of Goryong's inappropriate acts are recorded in Goryeo Sajolyo and Goryeo Sa. Goryeo Sajolyo and Goryeo Sa are chronicles of the early history of ancient Korea written by the civil officers. The king Goryeo had always opened parties and spent time with the civil officers instead of organizing the government. He spent massive amounts of money for his parties and he ignored all the advices from his advisors. He fired all advisors who opposed him from having parties and entertainments. Eventually, the remaining advisors were the ones who enjoyed the entertainment and the parties with the king. Most of his parties were large-scale, having to float a lot of boats, all with expensive decorations on it. Goryeo Sajolyo describes that the boat that the king rides is decorated with embroidered silk and took 3 years for crafting. In one of the parties, the king floated 19 boats on the lake, all of them decorated with dyed silk. He even implemented silk sail on all 50 boats, boarded female entertainers with music and fishing tools, then started the parties. He also made several artificial lakes so that he could have parties on them. Goryeo-sa describes that the king built a dike in order to make a lake, The soil was white sand and the current was swift, so it often broke when there was rain. And whenever it broke, people had to repair it, giving them no time to rest, causing them to suffer. These direct quotes from the Goryeo 사절료 shows how much expense was spent on parties by 의종. In 고려사, the recorder uses the word again, which shows the frequency of these parties. The king ordered the military officials and the soldiers to guard the king and the civil officers during the parties. He even told the soldiers to carry his palanquin. Later, when 의종 was expelled by the military officials, one of the ambassadors criticized the king, saying, "Key for ruling a country is improper usage of money and loving the people." However, 의종 wasted money by building towers and made the people suffer, and always chased for enjoyments, not caring about the government affairs. Since there are no officials giving advices, it is reasonable that he was expelled. A military official, Go, secretly told top military official Jeong saying, "How can I tolerate the situation where civil officers eat until they're full and got drunk all day, while the military officials are all starved and tired?" King Eujong was wasting the military resources that should be protecting the country for his own good, not even giving them proper payment or even food. Also, the civil officers often humiliated, insulted, and looked down upon the military officials. In 1142, a civil officer Kim Don-jung burned Jeongjungbu's beard, which was one of the biggest insults to a person at that time. In 1170, King Eujong held another feast, and he also held a martial arts competition for entertainment. Then General Lee So-eung, who was at his late 50s, was forced to challenge the champion, who was about 20. The old general didn't stand a chance against the young champion and fell down to the ground. Then a civil officer named Han Rui insulted the general and even slapped him across the face in front of the king and many fellow soldiers. In both cases, the civil officers were not punished for their actions. For Jeongjungbu, he was even exiled from the government for punishing Kim Don-jung by himself. These humiliations and abuse from civil officers and the king ignited the flames of anger towards the government, causing the military officials to organize one of the most violent revolts against the discrimination.
1170년 발생한 무신정변은 이전까지 권력을 장악한
Mushins, the military officials, broke the government system where only people who were born into nobilities were able to gain power, but instead allowed people of the low status to get promoted by their accomplishments. This incident broke the original system and allowed Goryeo to develop a new government and economy system, and even more, develop a new culture. Even though Mushin JeongByun started off successfully, the result was not as successful. After military officials gained power, there were numerous conflicts between them. The endless greed of the military officials caused Goryeo to step closer to its downfall.